Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Excuse me, Supervisors, it is now 7 o'clock. I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors on this Tuesday, December the 15th, 2020. Next item on our agenda is honoring the flag and moment of reflection by Supervisor Nancy Coffee. Supervisors, please unmute, and together we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. My own flag this time. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it
stands
one
nation
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Supervisor Coffee. Everyone else, please.
Here we are near the end of 2020. 300,000 U.S. and 74 Eau Claire County COVID deaths, along with economic uncertainty, mental health, addiction, and food insecurity issues. Add to this COVID problem political unrest and social injustice, a perfect storm. But let's look to the silver lining. Gratitude for our community's resilience. Thanks to healthcare teachers and all essential workers. Thanks to DHS for helping with those in need with services, counseling, and others such as supplemental nutrition assistance. Thanks to the City County Health Department and P&D for emergency services for keeping their eye on the storm and their science-based guidelines to reduce our risk. Thanks to ADRC for assisting disabled and elderly residents, and the Strong Bodies class that keeps us all moving. Thanks to our county clerk staff for providing a safe and secure election. Thanks to the information system staff for making it possible for county workers to continue doing their jobs and for us to have this meeting virtually. Thanks to our county administrator and a county board chair for oversight and navigation. There are many more who have assisted us through this storm. It hasn't been an easy year. As county board members, I encourage you to reach out to someone in our community who could use your assistance and give them a helping hand, and to thank at least one person personally in our county from our county employees who have helped us through this troubling time. May we all be thankful. We will get through this storm, and may 2021 bring clear skies. Thank you. Chair, you're muted.
There you go.
There you go.
Janet, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Are you ready for the roll call?
Yes.
Thank you. Gibson?
Present.
McKinney?
Present.
Knight?
Here.
Pagonis?
Here.
Anton?
Here.
Zook? I did see Mr. Zook on, so I'm going to consider.
I'm here.
Thank you. Wilson? Stelgis. I did see Supervisor Stelgis, so I'm going to consider him present.
Hear me?
Can.
Maury,
Here.
Coffee,
Here.
Henning,
Here.
Bates. I did see Supervisor Bates on. I'm going to consider her here.
He's muted.
Here.
There she is.
Okay, thank you. Russell? Gatlin?
Present.
Smyer?
Here.
Hambrick Boyle?
Here.
Neiman?
Here.
Dunning?
Here.
Wilkie?
Here.
Anderson?
Present.
Beckfield?
Here.
Schneider?
Here.
Leary? DeLuca?
Here.
DeLuca? Jansen?
She said. Present.
Profnagel?
Here.
Roberts?
Here.
Frank? Christofferson?
Present.
I'm just going to repeat the ones I have as absent. Pagonis? Chilson?
Janet, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, gotcha. Chilson? Thank you. Russell? Leary? And Kronk. So there's 26 present, 3 absent.
Thank you. We do have quorum. Next item on the agenda is approval of journal of proceedings from December the 1st, 2020. Motion?
I so move. Nancy Coffee.
Moved by Coffee, second.
Neiman,
By
second.
Supervisor Robert.
I heard Neiman first, so second by Supervisor Neiman. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the journal of proceedings? I hear none. We'll do this by voice vote. Please unmute. All those in favor of approval of the journal of proceedings, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. I hear no nays, therefore it is unanimous. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Samantha, we have public comment.
I did not receive any public comment.
Is there any member of the public online who wishes to present public comment?
Yes, there is.
Would you identify yourself, please?
You bet. Robert Carr, 1418 Highland Avenue, Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Thank you.
I've never done this via phone. I usually show up in person at these things, so I apologize if I don't play by the correct rules. Feel free to stop me or correct me as necessary. My concern is the article in today's paper from the sheriff about individuals who are employed by the county who are stonewalling an investigation. I don't understand why this is being allowed to happen. How you as the supervisor group who represent myself and others as the voting public is allowing that to continue. It is an investigation, is my understanding. They are bound to answer questions unless they wish to not incriminate themselves, which is also fine, but then the proceedings should move forward for that particular area should be investigated if they are trying to hide something. I don't understand why they're being allowed to hide behind a stalling tactic. It's time to move forward. They should be held responsible for their actions. If there's nothing wrong, wonderful. Clear them and move on, and then we don't need to spend money on this. If there is something wrong, then they should be held responsible to answer, or they should be held in obstruction or contempt or whatever the correct answer is. But this continued allowing them to just skate on whatever is going on is absolutely unacceptable by individuals who are elected by the public to do your job. My particular representative is Representative Kronk, who's not there this evening, but I would just like you to answer why they're being allowed to continually block an investigation that is being run by the county. That is my question.
So this is time for, excuse me, for public comment and not for dialogue. So we thank you for your question, and we hope that we will be able to provide an answer at some point in our deliberations. But this is a time simply for you to make your comment and not a time for question and answer. So we're going to proceed. Sorry?
Thank you, and I look forward to a timely answer.
Thank you. Is there any other person wishing to present public comment? I hear none. We will proceed to the reports to the county board. For the first one, I will call Judge Schumacher for recognition of Rich White and Dana Smetana. Your Honor.
Thank you. Get my video going here. Supervisor Coffee started off with an appropriate theme of thankfulness because we're here tonight to recognize two attorneys who come from different sides of the aisle, but both of whom have been instrumental in the formation and operation of the county's Criminal Justice Collaborating Council. My guess is that some of you may not even know what the CJCC is or what we do. So I'll give you just a little bit of that information. The CJCC was established by this county board resolution in 2006. The principal mission of the council is to improve the administration of justice and promote public safety through planning and research, education, coordination, system-wide of the criminal justice incentives. It includes 15 appointed stakeholders in the criminal justice system and 3 members from the community at large. I like to think of the council as all the big dogs of each of the various agencies getting together to look at what we're doing and why we do it that way, whether it seems to be working and how we know that. There are members from the clerk of court, the sheriff, chief of police, the county administrator, the board chair, the human services director, city attorney, public defender's office, district attorney's office, restoration, restorative justice, corporation counsel, the health department, and judiciary are all involved with this group. It's been an active group. Eau Claire County is known statewide and indeed nationally as a leader in evidence-based decision practice. We're data-driven. Indeed, this board approved the hiring of a data analyst in 2013, and that's proven to be invaluable. Last year, we honored retired judges Barland and Proctor. Tonight, we honor Dana Smetana and Rich White. Dana began her legal career as an assistant state public defender in 1984 and retired 32 years later as the public defender regional attorney manager for primarily Eau Claire, Hudson, and the Rice Lake area. She still practices from time to time, although I admit I haven't seen her recently. She's made presentations across the state and country on a variety of topics, including evidence-based practice. Rich White has been practicing as an attorney for 38 years. He was a prosecutor for 22 years and the Eau Claire County District Attorney from 2000 to 2011 when he went into private practice. Rich has also been a prolific speaker and a proponent of collaboration and evidence-based practice. Dana and Rich, in my mind, are kind of a package deal. They come together. It's hard to separate out their contributions to the CJCC. We as a council get things done and got things done because they are leaders. They were dedicated, hardworking, and above all, truly collaborative. They were able to take a step back from their roles as advocates and look at our system critically and independently. It was never about what was best for the prosecutors or what was best for defense counsel. Rather, it was what's best for our system and our community. They were receptive to criticism and innovation. They were willing to be bold and take a chance by making changes. They were teachers and advocates among their staff. So to each of you, we thank you tonight. It's hard to make a virtual presentation of a physical award, but trust me, there are two nice glass awards that read, presented to Dana or Rich for your dedication and service to the Eau Claire County Criminal Justice Collaborating Council. We're in debt, truly, for all that you've done over the years for the CJCC. And perhaps we can have brief comments from Dana first, and then perhaps Rich.
Thank you, Judge Schumacher. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I will never, get used to this because every time I have court, I always say, can you hear me okay? I just can't get used to speaking virtually. The award because everybody was working so hard all the time. We were all putting in 60-hour work weeks trying to get some of the evidence-based decision-making things started. I think Judge Schumacher hit it on the head. A lot of counties wouldn't be able to do what we did, and that's because there was no collaboration. But Rich and I had known each other for years, decades, and I trusted Rich, and that's part of it. And I think he trusted me, and we were all taking risks in our roles. I remember one presentation I gave somewhere. I think it was in front of the Supreme Court justices. I remember one of my slides was me putting my law degree in the toilet because I felt like I was taking these risks ethically. But in the long run, although we all were trying to do what was best for the system, we all had our roles, and our role was always to do what was best for our clients. And a lot of the evidence-based decision-making things were what was best for our clients. And I was thinking about what I was most proud of, and I think the thing I'm most proud of is the treatment courts. I remember many evenings, late at night, we would spend time at Judge Stark's house, preparing and figuring issues out, and other weeks we'd be at 7 o'clock at the courthouse working together to get those treatment courts started. And I really felt like that was the one thing for our clients that was missing in Eau Claire County, for people that were repeat offenders to have this opportunity. So I appreciate the award. I always feel like it's not necessarily because the reward is in the progress that we've made. But I thank you, Judge Schumacher and the CJCC for recognizing our hard work.
Thank you. Rich? Rich White, are you on?
There we go. Similarly, I greatly appreciate the recognition, particularly because Dana and I are here together. It is absolutely true that we had great respect for each other and could step out of our shoes and see our situations from each other's perspective. And that was a key. Perhaps the one lasting moment I have that I remember as a prosecutor doesn't come from necessarily all of the bad people who I may have locked up or incarcerated. It comes from the handful of people who came into our office who were absolutely downtrodden, who may have ended up on the wrong side of the law, but clearly didn't deserve my criticism, my looking down at them, or my punishing them. What they deserved was a hand up and a way to get out of their situation. And if nothing else, the evidence-based decision-making system that Mike Schumacher, Dana Smetna, and so many others, and maybe me, a small part of, allowed for was to try to figure out how to deal with different people differently so that we could meet their needs. And those people who needed a hand up were given a hand up. And if that's the reason why I'm here, I'm proud of that. Thank you.
Supervisors, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and we will provide a moment of applause.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Dana and Rich. The next item on our agenda is an update on the passenger rail project. Supervisor Dunning and Mr. Scott Rogers. Supervisor Dunning, will you begin?
Yes, thank you. Tonight, Scott Rogers, Ann Shell, and myself will be giving some background information on the proposed passenger rail service between Eau Claire and St. Paul, and the desire to create a municipal government commission along that route. Later on in the agenda, there is a resolution committing Eau Claire County to support the creation of an intergovernmental agreement to oversee the proposed rail service and to join the commission. Scott will be providing the rail service part of the presentation, and Ann from the West Central Wisconsin Planning Commission will provide the need to have this commission. Ann was part of the Gateway Corridor Commission that will provide the framework for this commission. It is anticipated that Eau Claire County will spearhead this project. Administrator Schaaf has taken the lead and sent invitations to the various local governments and interested parties to a WebEx meeting on December 17th from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock to introduce the project and the resolution and to ask for their participation in the project. Scott Rogers is the Governmental Affairs Director for the Eau Claire Chamber of Commerce and has been the chairman of the West Central Wisconsin Rail Coalition for as long as I have been part of the organization. He has done extensive work with the Minnesota and Wisconsin DOT, the Federal Rail Transportation Committee, and many state and private rail groups for the promotion and development of passenger service between the Twin Cities and Milwaukee, Chicago. This also includes high-speed service. Scott will now provide the background on this project. Scott?
Well, thank you, Supervisor Dunning, and Administrator Schaaf has some slides to show just to illustrate a little bit of what brought us to where we are today and why we're moving forward and suggesting this step at this time. Here you see a map of the West Central Wisconsin route from Eau Claire to the Twin Cities. We can go to the next slide. The West Central Wisconsin Rail Coalition actually was formed several years ago, really looking at passenger rail as an important future economic need for our community. In fact, Supervisor Dunning may remember that my predecessors as chair of this were Ray Willoughby and Owen Ayers. So those were started, and this effort was started by some key leaders in our community in both education and business. And we go to the next slide. Several years ago, the state of Wisconsin was actually involved in a multi-state effort to build a Midwest passenger rail system. And if you look at this map, there's only a dotted line to Eau Claire, which was a bus connection to the existing route. And what the people from our community recognized was that we have a corridor between Eau Claire and the Twin Cities that is one of the fastest growing parts of the state. We can go to the next slide to illustrate that. With the universities that we have, the traffic that we have, that it certainly is a source of traffic and would be important to link our communities with larger major cities. And what the Rail Coalition initially was successful in getting done was to try to work to get us on the planning maps. And if you go to the next slide, there have been some studies done in the past. Wisconsin DOT did a study in 2004 that showed either a through route through Eau Claire or an Eau Claire to Twin Cities route was feasible from a ridership standpoint. Next slide. The Gateway Corridor study that was done in 2013 for potential commuter rail also showed that there could be significant ridership. Then if we move to the next slide, there's two more things that were planning documents that you could say we achieved our initial goal. One of them was the Minnesota Rail Plan. If you take a look at this, you see there's a line from St. Paul to Eau Claire. Minnesota recognized the importance of this corridor and included in phase one of their future rail system. And if you move to the next slide, we have the Wisconsin Rail Plan, which shows for a long-term system the Eau Claire to Menominee to Hudson to Twin Cities corridor being part of the expectation for a future rail system in Wisconsin. But a planning document doesn't by itself get you train service. And in fact, if you move to the next slide, some of the impetus is as our community has grown and we have needed to attract businesses and talent, it's become increasingly recognized that this could be a really key factor in connecting us and attracting talent and businesses. And here you have a comment from one of our major community businesses, Rail Credit Union, which among others have said this could be a very important part of what we're doing, and they've been very involved in our efforts as well. So what we try to do is say, what can we do to move this project along? And if we go to the next slide, you can see our attitude we took on. We said, let's not look back at the past, but let's look at the innovations and new ideas that are being applied elsewhere or even here and locally. So things like public-private partnerships, collaboration, innovations in financing. We established an organizing council led by primarily business people to look at what could be done differently. And we said, let's start with the Eau Claire to St. Paul corridor as a way to get things going. If you look at the next slide, there's some illustrations of some of the things that we've seen. One is the picture in the upper left is a corridor that's being built by private capital right now between Orlando, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami by an organization called Brightline, and they're developing stations right around that. The one on the right, Normal, Illinois, is in central Illinois. It's on the Chicago to St. Louis rail corridor with 5 trains a day each way, a mid-sized city with a university, which might sound familiar to some of us. And when they developed their station site, they've attracted over $200 million in additional development around the station and have ridership over 200,000 people right now. The other thing we noticed is that some of the most successful efforts around the country where there was a local jurisdiction that got involved in either helping to create or to manage passenger rail service. So things like the Southern Rail Coalition, the Great River Rail Coalition is in the Minnesota side between La Crosse and the Twin Cities. In Montana, the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority is in the process of being formed to try to establish service to southern Montana. So if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the steps we've been undertaking. We started developing a business plan. We looked at the Minnesota Rail Plan, which envisioned 4 trains a day between Eau Claire and the Twin Cities, which gets you enough ridership to make it convenient and useful. Looked at a public-private partnership, seeking out a private developer, operator, and marketer. We've also talked to the Union Pacific Railroad that owns the tracks, and they are willing to entertain this. They have capacity, and if we provided a market rate for access, they're very interested in doing it. Also, transit-oriented development and using the economic activity around station sites is a way to make the project successful. And then a major part of that is, what is the governance structure going to be? And that's where the idea of a multi-county or multi-jurisdictional commission came up. And it also helps to make you eligible for federal programs that have been increasing in recent years. There are several that can be used to develop passenger rail service. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see a map of the route that would run on the Union Pacific tracks, some of the potential stations that we've been looking at. And we can go to the next slide as well and talk about some of the aspects of the service. It would be an auto-competitive travel time, so you could go as fast or faster than driving, 4 trips a day. And then you'd be able to take a bicycle, you'd be able to relax, Wi-Fi, get some work done, connections at the other end, and really redeem the time so that you're not spent with your hands on the wheel, but being productive or enjoying the trip. So if we go to the next slide, we do have a private partner that's potential that we've been working with, an organization out of Chicago called Corridor Rail Development that in the past has been involved in equipment leasing, is developing a business that would develop passenger rail, much like a developer would create other kinds of developments like real estate development, and they've been interested in working with us. And then the next slide shows some other things we've been investigating. West Central Regional Planning did a paper for us on value capture for transportation investments, some ways that you can use that stationary activity to generate revenue and other things to help make the service successful. So the next slide talks about the next steps that we've been looking at. We are in the process of completing our financial due diligence and hopefully confirming a memorandum of understanding with our private operator, Corridor Rail Development. One of the things the railroad has asked for is an engineering study of the track so we can determine what kind of capital improvements are going to be required. We've secured a consultant for that, and the Corridor Rail Development has said that they would finance or pay for that part of it. And then we're looking at that governance, and that's where this idea of a Chippewa-St. Croix Rail Commission has come up, and I'm going to call on Ann Schell from West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning to talk a little bit about what brought us to this stage.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here this evening. And talking about the Gateway Corridor, the Chippewa St. Croix Corridor Commission, I wanted to take you back a little bit to about 2009, when there was a Minnesota Gateway Corridor Commission working on an alternatives analysis and feasibility studies for commuter options in the I-94 corridor. In about 2009 or so, a number of Wisconsin agencies and governments, including Eau Claire County, were individually involved in the studies with Minnesota as committee members and such, but individually involved. And it got to the point where Minnesota had the Gateway Corridor Commission. We didn't really have anything comparable. It was difficult to have a unified voice for the area that was involved in that study. So in about 2010, about 10 years ago now, it was late in 2010, the Wisconsin decided to put together the Wisconsin Gateway Corridor Coalition along the I-94 corridor, and at that time was put together through MOUs with 5 counties, Barron, Chippewa, Eau Claire, Dunn, and St. Croix, and 4 municipalities, Eau Claire, Chippewa, Altoona, and Menominee. And that organization gave us a unified voice and kind of a central receptacle of information, and it helped to strengthen our part of the project and to communicate with the comparable organization in Minnesota. So that's essentially what we're looking for here, is to be able to build that strength, to have us all on the same page, hearing the same things, talking about the same things, and promoting this very worthy endeavor.
Administrator Schaaf, do you want to talk about the next steps that we're planning? Yep.
Thank you. Yes. Could you mute yours? Thank you. So our next steps, later this week, we are actually meeting with all of our potential partners and sharing this presentation, as well as what we hope to be the first steps, which will be if Eau Claire County and the other jurisdictions pass this resolution, it brings those local governments together to have a conversation about how they want to form. So the first step is really, how do our local governments want to work together and form this rail commission that would actually work with the Rail Coalition and other partners? It's anticipated that as we continue the process and as that group coming together defines what that process looks like, that they will actually be bringing forward an MOU to talk about how they will work together, and they will develop the practices and processes under which they will operate. Thank you.
And I'll go ahead and mention that when you look at the resolution itself too, that there are several bullet points there that talk about the kind of work that the commission would do and how it would advance the service. And then sort of finishing up my slides, you see the slide you're looking at right now shows it as a phase 1. So this would not be the sort of end game. That we really see this as the first step and an important step and all by itself worth doing. But in terms of the long-term future, if you go to the next slide, we're also interested in traveling not just west, but east. And you may recall that this body several weeks ago actually passed a resolution supporting some plans Wisconsin DOT has right now to not only add a second train on the current route, but to connect that train to Eau Claire with a shuttle service. And if you move to the next slide, there's going to be a study coming out from the Federal Railroad Administration in the next few weeks probably that looks at a Midwest rail system for the long-term future. And it shows a core system here with some of the most high potential routes. And one of those is Chicago to the Twin Cities because of the tremendous side of the travel market. And of course, we see that just every time you go out to I-94. And this would help position our community to be on that route when it is developed. We have some additional information on the last slide, just showing where our website is if you want to check out more information about the Rail Coalition and the value of the rail project. So appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if there is any supervisor who wishes to speak. Please use the raise hand function, except for the two online. Are there any questions? Please use the raise hand function. I see none. I'm sorry, Supervisor Gatlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I participated in some meetings, Mr. Rogers, way back. We all met when you mentioned those two gentlemen that you mentioned that was running this before, when they were there with the presentation. And there was already a passenger car that we could purchase. I thought it was like from that organization in Florida. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Our our planned private partner right now, Carr Rail Development, they do have control of some passenger rail equipment. That's actually their background as an organization. And so they have identified the equipment that they would be using. There are some high quality double level stainless steel cars that were built in the 50s and 60s that they intend to refurbish for the service.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Schneider with a question.
Supervisor Schneider.
Would that equipment be made ADA compliant then?
Yes, that's really a given nowadays. It has to be that way. Amtrak, all of its services are now ADA requirements, and any passenger carrier has to be, and that's certainly part of it. And this is an important kind of transportation where you're offering an alternative to driving for people, for whatever reason they want to drive, whether they want to just be more productive or that they can't drive. And so it would provide that kind of value.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, any other discussion? I see none. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you.
I'm sure you take a lot of joking for that. Thank you for being in our neighborhood, Supervisor Dunning and the administration staff. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is an update by the outside counsel, Rich White. Before we proceed to this item, the chair is limiting this discussion to a half an hour. Each supervisor would have the right to speak 2 times for no more than 5 minutes. I'm doing this because of the potential for a lengthier discussion. So, and I'm also going to ask if Administrator Schaaf wishes to introduce this portion.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Smeyer. The county contracted with Weld Riley quite some time ago in the form of legal counsel to provide guidance, oftentimes in regard to specific personnel related issues. And as we had need for an attorney who could provide guidance to the county regarding its potential liability with the work that it does with its employees, in the current situation that the county is working through with all of our partners, with the Sheriff's Department and the Department of Human Services, we needed the additional voice in the process to provide some guidance. And I think that the reason that you have this gentleman, Rich White, presenting this evening is there was a question by supervisors regarding the process and the work that Rich White has done on behalf of the county. So I would actually turn the microphone over to Counsel White.
Mr. White.
Thank you. I want to provide you with some background information so that potentially there can be a different perspective on things. The Eau Claire Leader Telegram tonight or today had an extensive article with quotes from a friend of mine, Sheriff Kramer, in which he asserted that no one was willing to give the Sheriff's Department information they wanted and that he viewed it as stonewalling. I think I have some information which provides a little bit of a different perspective on that particular point. But I want to start from exactly the point I made, that Ron is a friend of mine. Many people who I know may agree with him are friends of mine. They may not agree with me, but the fact of the matter is my opinions that I'm providing to you are objective opinions that have nothing to do with any particular axe to grind I have or don't have, or any particular position. In fact, I've been out of county government for going on 10 years now, and quite frankly, I don't have any kind of strong interest as to these issues. So we were asked to consult with the county initially because the Sheriff's Department wanted to interview some employees at Human Services. I talked to Sheriff Kramer on September 24th, and I advised him that forced interviews of any employees at Human Services would be a bad idea. If indeed any of them had been involved in criminal activity, a forced interview by the county would very likely, in fact, in all absolute likelihood, result in statements they made being inadmissible. I also pointed out that the best, most logical way to proceed here would be for the Sheriff's Department and any other individuals who shared an interest in their particular endeavor to share the information they had with county administration, and that if indeed an audit was deemed to be appropriate by the county board, all parties should agree as to how that occurred. We know that that's not what took place. In October of this year, in response to a September, quote, official records request from the Sheriff's Department, I met with members of the Sheriff's Department, and I pointed out to them that their request was incredibly overbroad. I mean, it was amazing. They were literally requesting 13 separate items, one of them being any and all business records related to accounts payable and receivable for the years 2017 to 2020. Another asking for literally every email between Human Services management or fiscal staff with other county staff, vendors, or contractors, with no time period specified. It just was mind-boggling. In that meeting, the Sheriff's Department said, we will try to reduce the scope. It then submitted on October 14th what it labeled an open records request. About a month later, in my capacity as being retained by the county to assist the county in working our way through this, on behalf of Human Services, I provided a response which pointed out, one, it is not consistent in my view with the open records law for it to be utilized by one county agency to fish for information from another. It's to be used by members of the public to receive insightful information as to governmental activities. Aside from that, though, I noted that we would provide you with a good deal of information, and we did. By law, some of that information had to be redacted. However, we had to decline to provide some information because the request was just overwhelming in scope still. At the end of my correspondence to the Sheriff's Department, I suggested, why don't we meet? Why don't you meet with me, with Diane Cable, the Human Services Director, with the Fiscal Manager, with the Finance Director, and let's see what we can work out to get information that might be helpful. No response. On December 1st, I received an email from the Sheriff's Department with, had to be 15 or 20 pages attached to it, of requested information for an audit the Sheriff's Department had apparently contracted for on its own. And with that email, it said there would be likely more requests for information. The first step in responding to that was for me to ask Human Services, tell me what this entails. How much time is going to be involved? The response I received was that we'll have to put 2 to 3 people to work on this for a month or more. The Finance Department and IS are going to have to put multiple people to work on this. My opinion was at that point that this request for information without legal basis just simply could not be honored. In my view, pursuing what has been pursued in the way it has been pursued is the epitome of bad government. It is the antithesis of good government. And the reason I say that is because, in my view, here's what should happen. If indeed something is afoot that is criminal, it ought to be pursued by the Sheriff's Department, by the District Attorney's Office, through normal criminal means. Judge Schumacher earlier was kind enough to point out how old I am by the fact that I've been practicing law for 38 years, and I was a prosecutor for 22 years and have practiced criminal law far beyond that. In all of my time, I have never, ever, ever seen anything like this, not even remotely. So the problem is when these things happen, the county gets comments like that gentleman tonight who feed off of the public comments that there's been stonewalling, and that's the perception that's out there. We have a $40 million department that performs vitally needed services to help people. I told you earlier in response to the award I was nice enough, or that was nice enough to be provided to me, that one of my proudest moments was when a young woman came in my office. She had no money, had issued some bad checks. What was I possibly going to do? Throw her in jail? People like that need help. They need help from Human Services. We ought not to be spending our time tearing down Human Services. If there is something criminal afoot, what the Sheriff's Department ought to do is obtain what it needs through subpoenas or search warrants. It is not sufficient for Sheriff Kramer to tell me I have probable cause, but I won't tell you what it is. If that's not what's going to happen, then the county board ought to decide, are there management things that ought to be looked into? And that's fair game. It's a huge agency. It has huge fiscal responsibilities. And if the county board decided, you know, as much of a matter of good government and management, we want to see if we can do things better, we will do an audit. Then the audit ought to take place under the auspices of the county board and county administration, supervised by the county board and county administration. So to me, this is sort of the worst hybrid of situations. It is not a conventional, acceptable criminal investigation, and it is not a governmental review that is premised upon full knowledge being shared with the decision makers at issue. And this can be dealt with, but it ought to be dealt with in one of those two ways, because I honestly don't know whether there has been something happening that shouldn't happen. All I know is the way to get at it is not the way that has been transpiring. Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to present a question or a point of discussion? If so, please use the hand raise function, except for our two supervisors on the phone. Supervisor Leary.
Mr. Chair, I was wondering if you could comment, have any employees been advised by management not to cooperate with the investigation? One of the concerns I have had is employees without union representation may feel that their job would be in peril if they cooperated. So can you comment on that, please?
I'm sorry, was that directed at me or?
I think it is.
Directed at you.
Okay. Yes. Well, when we were initially consulted about this interview issue, what we said was, in the law, there is a thing known as the Garrity Warning. This is typically what takes place when employees, for example, of Eau Claire County, may be suspected of wrongdoing. The bosses have a right to know whether they've done something they shouldn't do. So civilly, the bosses can say, you will disclose what is going on here, or you may face repercussions. However, if that's done, that has to be completely separate from a criminal track investigation. Years ago, I was involved in a situation like this where a police officer was suspected of wrongdoing. It could have been criminal wrongdoing. It may just have been violation of employee rules. There had to be separate investigations, separate tracks. So the advice we gave as to this is the county should not be directing anyone to be interviewed by the sheriff's department if there is a suspicion that that person may be involved in criminal activity, because that will potentially result in statements they make being rendered inadmissible.
Thank you. Supervisor Leary, was that a response?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Chilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question will be for Attorney Rich White. Unfortunately for us as county board members, and I get to ask this quite a bit, the information we have received in regard to the status of your employment, the communication on our end, in my opinion, hasn't been very good. I've had to rely on numerous media outlets, the TV, the Leader Telegram, the University Eau Claire Spectator newspaper. My question is twofold. The first of it, the news or the information disseminated in those media outlets claimed that you were hired by Catherine Schaaf, County Administrator, and then other articles stated that you were hired by the County Board Chairman and the first Vice Chair. The reasons outlined for your employment were one, to help the Department of Human Services, number two, to assist the sheriff in the investigation, number three, for the county board members themselves, four, to assist County Attorney Tim Sullivan, number five, for the Human Resources Department, and then lastly, number six, to protect the county corporation. And I guess my question tonight is if you could clarify for me, because I haven't been able to discern what the answer should be, is one, who actually hired you? And if one of these six reasons is the reason that you were hired, which one would be the most applicable for your employment for Eau Claire County?
Sure. The short and simple answer is I was retained by Eau Claire County. Our firm has a long-standing relationship with Eau Claire County where we will periodically get contacted and asked for assistance or advice, many times on labor issues. So stemming from that, we were requested to provide the county with advice and assistance in connection with the Sheriff's Department contact of Human Services in connection with this. All the media reports on this don't necessarily come from official sources, so I'd be a little bit careful about just relying upon media reports as to what my purpose is. But in a nutshell, my purpose has been to assist Eau Claire County in connection with the Sheriff's Department intended investigation and request for information. And it made sense for the county to have outside counsel because the county corporation counsel shouldn't put himself between two departments. And that's one of the reasons why things shouldn't be happening as they are. It's their request being made civilly from one department to another, and Tim Sullivan shouldn't be forced to be choosing between those two. So I'd like to think that my job is to assist the county, but of course it is in connection with the Sheriff's Department Human Services situation. I don't represent the Sheriff's Department. I don't represent Human Services. I represent the county.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Just a moment, Supervisor Bates, please wait. Supervisor Wilkie is next, followed by Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Attorney White, and congratulations on your recognition award this evening.
Thank you.
My father often told me those that have nothing to hide, hide nicely. He also told me to be open and honest in what you say and you do. And you won't have to try to remember or worry about what you said or did in the past. Now, he gave me this advice at a teenage age and young adult. And of course, wires weren't always tied in upstairs at that time and didn't listen to him. But as you grow a little bit older, that was pretty sound advice. With that philosophy in mind, you know, the county, the taxpayer, essentially the employer of employees. You told us what we couldn't do partially there, but do we have any legal rights to expect employees to cooperate, but at the same time protect them so that there's no reprisal from management? and then follow this belief with the law enforcement investigation. It concerns me that we've got employees that, for whatever reason, are they fearful that with no protection, if they reveal things? I understand your one answer that if they've committed an act themselves, why they might not want to be interviewed. Some of our employees, my understanding was, were very cooperative. They didn't want even their own private counsel there, didn't feel a need for that. Do we have some legal rights as the employer that we expect that they protect the interests of their employer?
There is absolutely nothing wrong with an employer expecting an employee to provide information, even under the circumstances that you allude to. The complication comes from sort of this odd hybrid or mix of maybe criminal, maybe not criminal, maybe civil, and that's where it becomes problematic. And there's no easy answer to that, but yeah, sure. If, you know, I finished my letter on December 11th with these sentences. I said, that final observation leads me to a third point, which is that any audit of human services along the lines suggested by your email, the Sheriff's Department, and the WIFLE documentation ought to occur only if deemed appropriate by county administration and the county board. To the extent of its ability, human services would cooperate with an audit deemed to be necessary and appropriate by county administration and the county board. So I think in a lot of respects, Supervisor Wilkie, you and I are on the same page. I have no problem with an audit taking place. I just think it's better initiated and controlled from you and the other supervisors in county administration.
One follow-up to that, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
You may.
We're on the same page on the first part, as you said, wanting people to be open and honest and try to move this forward. But I'm troubled with the second part, what you said. I don't believe it's anywhere's our responsibility or authority to control a forensic audit. That's really belongs in the realm of law enforcement, as you probably know better than me. Once you get into an investigation, that will determine the scope. And I don't think we have a role to be telling law enforcement how to investigate or what they can investigate.
Oh, I agree. I spent 22 years in exactly that position. But the problem is, it's not just what the Sheriff's Department is doing. It's that they're saying, give us this stuff. Give us this universe of stuff, which is overwhelmingly massive in scope. That's the problem. A law enforcement agency can say, give us that stuff. A cop can walk up to anybody on the street and say, I'd like to talk to you. Nothing wrong with that. But if the person says, no, I don't want to talk to you, that's the end of it. So if they want this stuff voluntarily, they can ask for it, but they're not entitled to it. If they want to do a forensic audit and there is a significant enough reason for information that they can get a subpoena or a search warrant for the information they are seeking, then they have the avenue to get their information. If there is not, then they don't. So, you know, the audit itself is pretty much a moot point without information. It's just a question of, can they simply demand the information Or do they have to have a subpoena, a search warrant, or should it be pursued as a civil matter through you and the other good folks who are in charge of the county?
Okay, I think you answered my question. The sheriff's going to have to proceed with search warrants and subpoenas. It's going to drag it out longer, but okay, thank you.
Supervisor Bates. You're muted, Supervisor Bates.
Ed,
Now you're.
I want to make one thing exceedingly clear, and that is, as the chair of the Human Services Board and the board itself, we have taken the position of just stepping back on this particular issue, and it's absolutely not involved in any way with the hiring of legal counsel or even recommending it. And I think it's important to make that clarification, because sometimes comments that are made in this particular forum are picked up and used as information or misinformation by other entities. So understand that our role, my role in particular, because of this comment that was made, I had nothing to do, and I'm not interested in the procedures of hiring legal counsel. And I want that to be absolutely clear.
Thank you. Supervisors Chilson and Leary, your hands are still raised. Are you asking for second opportunity to speak?
I just didn't take it down. I will do so now.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Supervisor Chilson?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I hadn't taken my hand down, but just as a follow-up to Supervisor Bates, I couldn't agree more that misinformation can be very detrimental and can cause a lot of issues. And maybe moving forward, there could be, in response to my question, which was a two-pronged question, maybe the administration, the county board chair, could put together a response to answer my questions so that we wouldn't have the confusion and or misinformation, and that all of the board members and media sources could be quite clear on that, so that moving forward there wouldn't be any sort of misinterpretation of what's going on. Maybe you want to take a look at that and put something forth so all of us are on the same page and we all have the exact same answers.
Thank you for the suggestion. Supervisor Gatlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am so pleased to hear Mr. White's complete explanation. He hit everything right on the button to make it clear of what's going on, as well as Attorney Sullivan has made it clear why he wouldn't be participating as the attorney for the county. It's a conflict of interest, and especially hearing Mr. White explain how one department is I don't know the word. I don't want to use the word attack, but the departments kind of working against each other is just so heartbreaking for me. And I've been hearing this and people's voices there. It's like there's so much accusation is inferred. And I want to make it clear that, as he also referred, Garrity rights are for public employees. They don't have to cooperate if they feel it's going to intimidate them. And if we keep saying that, oh, if you got nothing wrong, then why do you fear an interview? Well, it's intimidating to anybody with law enforcement, and they hear and read the misinformation printed by the local paper. It is intimidating for them, and that's almost an infringement on their civil rights if you're not going to allow them representation. Thank you.
Supervisor Dunning is next, and before he makes his comment, I will point out to you that we have about 5 minutes left in this discussion period. Supervisor Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. White. Last night at our Finance and Budget Committee meeting, I thought I heard the sheriff say that there were several issues of criminal documents or criminal related documents that were received. Has that been the case?
I don't know. You know, I don't have any of the information that the sheriff's department alludes to as being its information. Sheriff Kramer was quoted as saying, "We have information that we believe constitutes probable cause that there may be criminal activity." I don't know whether they do or don't. And the problem is, if one person commits a crime and you have information about it, you have probable cause. If that person works in an agency that has 1,000 people in it, is it probable cause that the agency as a whole is criminal in nature? So these are complicated things. And, you know, in response to Supervisor Wilkie's comment that, well, then the sheriff will have to go forward with subpoena and search warrant. There is an alternative here. The county board could basically endorse an investigation or an audit that will do one of two things. It will either disclose bad practices, or it will disclose that nothing has happened that's wrongful. Either way, that can get to the same end. And if there is criminal activity that's uncovered, it will be prosecuted. If there is not, an unfortunate cloud will be removed from what otherwise is an agency that has done laudable work since I've worked with them to protect members of our community.
Thank you. I see no other requests to speak. We're going to move on in our agenda. I don't want to neglect the fact that we have some members on the phone. Is there any member on the phone who wishes to speak? I hear none. Thank you, Mr. White. And
thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is an update on the carbon neutrality resolution from Rod Esslinger. Mr. Esslinger.
Good evening, Chair and board members. Samantha, if you could allow me to, oh, okay, there we go. I'm going to share my screen and let's see if this works here. Okay, Chair Smeyer, just a nod of your head if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Thank you. So yeah, I wanted to connect with the board tonight on this is an oral report on file 1920-03, and this is actually I as I sit here talking to you, I think of Supervisor Dunning could present this report just as well as I could. Supervisor Dunning, as you know, along with Supervisor Boerboom at the time, were lead authors of this resolution. And supported it, and the board acted on this back in April of 2019. So just a quick introduction. I'm not going to go over this. We'll provide this PowerPoint to the board members that were not on the board. You can go back and look at the resolution. Supervisor Dunning and Supervisor Boerboom did a good job in with the fact sheet and kind of justifying why we, with the supporting information. And basically what this establishes goals to present 100% renewable energy carbon neutrality by the year 2050 for Eau Claire County. And then it also allocated $10,000 from the contingency plan to planning and development. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit this evening about what has transpired since then, the budget, what the money was used for, and where we are to date, and the next steps included in this. The resolution, as I noted, included a plan of action that the supervisors provided. That plan of action, basically, the first step of that was to create a baseline, a greenhouse gases emissions baseline. And this is kind of the timeline. You can see the timeline was adopted in April of 2019. December of 2019, you can see that we utilized a portion of that money to acquire a subscription through ICLEI ClearPath. It's a greenhouse gas inventory program that we utilize to establish to input our numbers. I'm not going to click on this due to time, but the link that's provided on your PowerPoint that you'll be able to go in there and see a little bit. It's an explanation of the ClearPath tool. It's a climate action tool. It's a modeling tool. What we did is we inputted complete data that we had available from Xcel Energy, Eau Claire Cooperative, Eau Claire Energy, I should say, and other partners that we had. Matt Tyson, the facilities director, worked on getting us the data that we needed to input for our numbers to help us create that that baseline. And that baseline was completed, as you can see in the chart, in June of 2020. All this was done by a planning intern, and working in partner with our senior planner, Matt Michaels. Supervisor Dunning was very much actively engaged in the process, and if he chooses to speak, he can give his insight on this process as well to date. We're not done, obviously, and here's a little bit, this is what that greenhouse gas inventory, it's just showing you a little bit. That's the link that you'll go to. There's a short video there. It gives you an explanation. Again, due to time, I'm not going to go into that for you this evening. I debated whether or not that some of this information was in the resolution and in the fact sheet, but with anything, it's an opportunity to educate and maybe just refresh ourselves on what greenhouse gases are and why are we concerned about it, and it's just not the carbon dioxide that we commonly think. It's a combination of multiple gases, and they come from multiple sources, and they have impacts on our Earth's atmosphere to basically retain or reflect that sunlight, or at the end of the day, it creates the warming of our atmosphere and our ozone. So it's just a quick schematic there, just a real high level piece there. So one of the things that you're going to see as outputs, and I'm not going to share the entire the study. If you wish to connect offline, I'd be more than happy. Matt and I, we can sit down and walk you through kind of the results and those sort of things. But one of the things that you're going to see is the carbon dioxide equivalent, or the measure, the CO2e. Basically, it's that number, and you can read that: the metric tons of carbon emissions with the same global warming potential as 1 metric ton of another greenhouse gas. And those greenhouse gases I kind of listed before, that is equivalent to the equation there that's provided. Just as a kind of a visualization, the picture on the right was created. That is sitting in the city of Copenhagen, Denmark, and what it was is just a kind of an illustration of what is a metric ton of carbon dioxide. So if you look at that, that is made up of shipping containers. So a shipping container is 9 feet tall, they 27 feet wide, and so when they stack them on top of one another, so they got essentially a cube, a square that's 27 square metric ton. So that is just kind of a illustration of what our inventory is showing. So it's a kind of a two-part. I'll toggle back between. We have a two-part where we look at the county operations on what we produce as far as in metric tons, and then we also look at the community and different things that are going on. So we have two main producers. Obviously, we have our buildings and facilities, and we have our vehicles fleet. So you can see where our tons of metric or our metric tons are coming from as far as our carbon outputs, and you can see quite a bit of it is coming from our buildings and our facilities, with some 17% coming from our facilities or our vehicle fleet. So with that said, one thing that we are looking at, and actually through a budget adjustment with our capital dollars last year, I think the county board, you as a board, supported moving in budget and finance, adjusting some dollars that were allocated for another project to Matt Tyson's project to replace the the lighting with LED lighting in the courthouse, and one of those things was a nice measure is that, okay, we took outdated or lighting that with LED lights, and the cost of the return on your investment, I believe we invested a significant amount, but there is an energy savings, and I think Matt's on. I think it was the 2 to 3 year return on your investment. So when we look at everybody's going to we're thinking, well, how is this all going to tie together? Well, we're going to get there and how it's tying together. But if we can identify certain projects like that through building and facilities, now we can start to shrink our carbon footprint in those areas. The vehicle fleet, as more electric vehicles and more hybrids come on, as we start to replace vehicles, I think that would be an opportunity to reduce that footprint. Our second opportunity is looking at the community sector, as it relates to our commercial, agricultural, solid waste, transportation, commercial, those sort of things. And the data that we have, you can kind of see where that all falls out. Now we have a lesser direct impact on those. That being said, you'll see in my next slide as the next steps, I think we still can get to some of those, as the city of Eau Claire did, by perhaps amendments to the to the building codes, where we can look at adjusting some of our building codes to ensure all construction, that whether if we permit it, that can be constructed in a manner that it's meeting the most current and best management practices as it relates to energy efficiency and those sort of things. The budget, as I noted, there was, as part of this resolution, it was a contingency shift of $10,000. That was the initial dollar amount that we got to take to purchase the ClearPath subscription. We actually purchased it in 2019, and we purchased it just recently in 2020. We had about $3,500 in intern. Most of that was, the majority of that, I should say, was with our intern that we spent. We had Orion work on this project. So the expenditures to date are about $7,000, with the remaining funds available of $3,000. Now, that $3,000 is not going to change everything that we need to change. What you did during your budget meeting was to support a position in my department, and that's the recycling sustainability coordinator. That position, as it was indicated during the budget discussions, and that was a budget amendment, if we all recall, that position is going to be utilized to connect with our departments. That position is going to encourage, be working on with our capital layout as we go to purchase vehicles, as we go to look at building projects. That person will be available to work with Matt and other building committee members to make that we have that sustainability piece that we need. So that is going to be a critical the critical piece that I think has been missing, and will help us move the ball down the field. Okay, and $10,000 didn't get us a lot. We wish we could have done more. Obviously, COVID threw a little curveball. We were planning to have another intern this past summer. That didn't really work out. So at this point, the next steps is that I just finalized the position description for the recycling sustainability coordinator. We'll be posting and hopefully interviewing for that early on in the first quarter. And as you recall, the 4/10, the 0.4 full-time equivalent will be allocated for the sustainability part. And then as you all know, that we still have our obligations to meet with our recycling program. So I suppose there's going to be days where maybe, it's going to be, a week or days that are going to be spent on sustainability, and there's going to be a shift, not sitting here measuring, but definitely it will be an added a bonus to have that position to work. I think as we work on our work plan that for the county on this particular carbon neutrality, Administrator Schaaf asked that I put that together and an action plan. One of the things I think we are going to focus on first, on what we can do internally to move the county towards that goal. Okay, so we have the county sector implementation. That's for focus priority number one, and that is as it's included in the position description for the coordinator, is to draw those connections between departments. Departments that have the facilities, have the vehicles, such as Parks and Forest, Highway. As you know, Highway Department is we just talked about a Highway Department, building committee that's going to be formed. That would help draw connections. The Sheriff's Department, facilities, and planning and development obviously would be the connector with this position. Capital budgeting, I think this is, again, when we talk about budgeting or for building upgrades or for project updates, we want to make sure that we have a focus, or we have the eye on the ball as far as how are we going to be sustainable with those projects. Again, vehicle purchases and equipment, utilities. I know that we've just recently purchased dryers, or Matt does a really good job in looking at the highest and most efficient use of those types. So and sometimes, again, you have to be able to be prepared to spend those dollars to save the dollars in the long run as well. Operational savings throughout the system. I can think of how we can utilize GIS for routing capacity capabilities. I'm just thinking, those sort of things that we can work with ADRC, Meals on Wheels. We can identify, delivery routes. We can identify where those individuals are that are receiving those meals, to save and to minimize the dollar or to miles traveled, which ultimately cuts down on gas usage and those sort of things. Next, we would look to purchase from ICLEI or the ClearPath module, the forecasting module, and then also the planning module. Those are two that's going to be really important as far as metrics. If we have the baseline, we're going to need to have forecasting capabilities, and then forecasting and planning capabilities to really provide the metrics to you as the elected body to make sure that we are meeting this goal. This is a resolution that you're committed to, and we as far as staff want to make sure that we provide you with that information and those measures to know that we are on task. And then you look at the community sector implementation. There we are going to look at our municipal partners, the City of Eau Claire. You should know that the City of Eau Claire has been participating in carbon neutrality before the county. When we can leverage off of that, because they're doing a lot of great things within the city. So they're covering 68,000 population center. They've already made some changes to their building codes and so forth. So we can benefit from their work that they've already done and so forth. And we can also assist. I know Supervisor Zook and Supervisor Gibson, we can have mentioned how do we partner and help those individuals out or those municipalities, and we can help in those areas as far as villages and towns. Town boards, help them, kind of start planning or at least thinking, going there and providing some education, some ideas. And then also leverage expertise, grant assistance. There is Xcel Energy, Eau Claire Energy Cooperative, ICLEI themselves. They're the professional. They're the company that we've been working with. They have. This is a worldwide company that has provided carbon neutrality and forecasting and planning. UW Extension. Just to note a few. We can also, our community sector also includes our agricultural community. As far as we are, I believe we have already a foot in the door there through our land conservation programs related to our sustainability projects. I could think about our demo farm, different things that we were working with. The 9 key element, the Eau Claire River Watershed Plan. So there's a lot of things that we already have are implementing, but just to draw some connections. And then also recently the governor has announced the climate change task force recommendation. There's a lot of opportunity there if those recommendations become reality. I believe that there's also going to be some grant and funding opportunity to move us in a area that we need to go. And then I should note, I know that Supervisor Chilson, or not Chilson, but Supervisor Stelgis has noted to me on multiple occasions as far as what we're doing and how we're managing the county forest and the carbon footprint there. And I should note that the ICLEI, the Clear Path program will be soon having the ability to inventory that. But we have to keep in mind that a forest carbon inventory for sequestration modeling is perhaps a little bit more complicated, and it takes some time. There's a lot of, we got to know the tree stand, the species, the number, the biomass, whether it's in the ground. So there's a lot to do with that, but ICLEI is working on that. So just a shout out to Supervisor Stelgis on that part. So
excuse me, Mr. Esslinger.
Yep.
Supervisor Stelgis happens to have his hand raised. So would you be willing to take questions?
I'm at that point. So Supervisor Stelgis.
Well, you preempted a lot of my questions, Rod, so that was good. I just think we all ought to recognize that a resolution for neutrality doesn't necessarily mean we're going to go to zero emissions. It just means that we can absorb as much as we emit. And so, your early work here is working exclusively on the emission side. And clearly, as we reduce that makes the task more manageable. But we really need to work on the absorption or sequestration side as well. And I think there's just an emerging body of science now that is starting to look at forestry practices as to which of those may optimize carbon absorption. And I think similarly, the agricultural community, plays a big role in that too, and what kind of crops we have, what sort of land cover we maintain throughout the year, and which plants particularly tend to absorb and store for a long term carbon underground from whence it came. So I'm glad to hear that there's a module on the way, and look forward to that. One other comment, and you mentioned this as well, the planning for our new highway shop. I would like to think that if we're going to take this on, that keeping this goal in mind should be a really important part of the planning process for that, not only for its operation, but also for its construction. Because it's my understanding, for example, that construction concrete is one of the biggest emitters that we have. So I hope that whoever gets on that commission weighs that heavily.
Yep, very good points. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning, followed by Supervisor Christopherson.
Thank you, Rod, for a great presentation. And one of the things to just add on to Mr. Stelgis said was the agricultural end. And Land Conservation Department has started into that already by buying a no-till device for planting crops. And a number of farmers, I think it was 6, used it last spring, and they intend to continue using that. And what that does is you don't disturb the ground and release the gases that have been absorbed, just like you don't cut down a tree. If you do, you lose the sequestration. So, and the Wisconsin Farmers Union is working with the farmers and educating them in the use of no-till crops, and is working real hard with that. And I know they've got the cooperation of the local farmers union folks also. So that's another step in the right direction.
Yeah, just a quick note on that. Thank you, Supervisor Dunning, for bringing up the no-till planter, or the no-till drill, as most refer to it. We had over 500 acres that were planted using cover crop, and that was a wide variety of reestablishing of just pasture land, and or just using it as cover crop. In our demo farm just outside of the city of Augusta, we've have several plots out there that we're tracking that. So we're very excited for that use there.
It also cuts down the amount of gas and diesel fuel that's being used, because you don't go across the field as many times.
Yep. Supervisor Christopherson.
Supervisor Christopherson, followed by Supervisor Hamburg-Boyle, followed by Supervisor Russell. Supervisor Christopherson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Smeyer, and thank you, Rod, for the presentation and for bringing this forward. I have 2 follow-up questions. With the ICLEI forecasting planning module, do we have the resources to continue with the renewal of that subscription? Are we going to use the leftover $3,000 for that, or do we need to approve that further with the board?
I'll answer that first part, and then you can ask your second one. Those dollars have basically that were put into 2019, they were carried over to the 2020. Anything that's not utilized out of that original $10,000, I'll be requesting to carry forward. I believe both of those modules are around that $1,800. So we might be a little short. I do have dollars in other parts of my budget, but that's something that this position to support the sustainability position to continue to move this program along came a little bit later than most of my budget was already complete. So I'll be looking at that for next year, and there may be some program funding that would be required there. So, but at this point, there's at least I would have dollars for one of those modules.
Okay, thank you. And then in some of our previous conversations, we've reviewed the document that the intern had worked on with the Renewable Energy Action Plan. And we had discussed bringing that to the board for review, and possibly even bringing it to the different committees for them to utilize it as a tool to discuss what their different areas could be doing to help support this.
Yep. Thank you for that note. So at this point, that part I'm going to pause until we get the person onboarded, hire the person, onboard the person, and have that individual really look at what we have done to date, look at the work plan, the action plan, and then start making those connections with other departments, as I noted, because those departments are actually in the position description, how we draw those parallels, and then I don't want to put it out in front unless that individual has some insight how we can maybe do it better. So yes, that is not something that is off the radar. It's on the radar, but maybe after the person is here a short time, and then we can come back to talk to the departments. I see it as a very fitting opportunity to tie it in with the capital planning committee that's formed, mostly department heads, and of those main departments that I said, working with administration, and then we can get that to the county board for sure. I want to make sure that this is a countywide, whether it's through the board of supervisors, through the department heads, departments. I think we all need to be part of this in order to make it effective. So we all have to be we all have to be committed to this. So yes, to answer your question, yes, but it may be several months from now.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Hamburg-Boyle, followed by Supervisor Russell. You're still muted.
Sorry, I was trying to get unmuted. Thank you, Chairman Smeyer, and thank you, Mr. Esslinger. I am wondering, given your comments about the community connections and partnerships, I'm aware that the Eau Claire Area School District has worked on energy uses and sustainability for years as one of the largest employers and economic driver for our community. They recently put solar on both high schools as part of embedding it into student learning. And I just wanted to make that statement to ask if you've made that connection with them, or if that would be another avenue to really make this part of the Eau Claire School District as well. We've even gotten some awards given what we've done with energy. So I wanted to just throw that out there.
Yep. Thank you for that comment. I have been watching that. I have not made a personal contact with the school district, but I've been, monitoring it in the media. At that point, this is something that we've talked about, solar, even at our facilities, or is there an opportunity? I'll just make note of another project that I'm aware of in Dane County. Dane County used it as an economic development opportunity where they had property that was available. They partnered with a energy cooperative or a company, and they're developing a larger solar farm, if you will, on the property, and they were able to get to, with that project alone, they were able to offset their carbon footprint. So they met their goal just on that one project. So we have to be aware of that. Are there areas within our facilities, that we could, make that investment to? And I know that, like the school district, that was a significant investment. However, there's paybacks on that, and what is your return on your investment? So clearly, that is something that, yes, we need to be thinking about.
Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Chair Smeyer. My question kind of piggybacks on the previous one. I'm wondering to what extent there are any projects or interest in this move out county, in the townships, in the villages. Have you been approached by other municipalities within the county, or do you see this as something that you're going to have to go out and do the outreach?
I'm a town supervisor in the town that I live at, and I know the struggles that town boards and smaller municipalities may face as far as, making some sort of investment to move that. I think it's going to be, to answer your question more directly, I think it's going to be a more of an educational outreach. We'll have to go and knock on doors. We have not been contacted saying that, oh, do you have a program? How can we learn more? Eau Claire Energy Cooperative covers much of our rural area. Now, Lynn Thompson is an advocate. They have a smaller solar farm. If you haven't been or know where they're located, they have a smaller farm that they offset, or a solar farm there that they offset some of their energy use. other than private property owners putting solar on their individual properties, we haven't had a lot of outreach from our, let's say, our agricultural community as it relates to that. Outside of what Supervisor Dunning has indicated is that a lot of our farmers are doing, they have no-till practices already in place. So that's by doing those things, they're minimizing the number of trips over the field and so forth. So this is, when we get into that community, that's, I think why we're suggesting the work plan to focus in-house first, take care of, get our things lined up, and then connect with our community partners. Our community partners are going to take a little time, and we're going to need support. We're going to need our extension partners. We're going to need, I think Supervisor Dunning mentioned our farmer union, DADCAP. I mean, there are our programs, and I'm excited to see if, what comes from the carbon or the climate task force recommendations, and if there's funding there. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the years to come, in short years to come. Yeah.
Do you see any role for a West Central Regional Planning Commission?
Yes, I mean those are part that is one of our main partners. That has they're connected. What do we have? 7 counties in our regional commission, our plan commission, and we could, if there are larger projects, there definitely could leverage dollars in that way, and we can share resources as well, across borders. I don't necessarily, this was Eau Claire County's resolution, but I'm certainly going to use Ned Noel's, the city assistant planner for the city of Eau Claire, and look to them to how do they apply for the charging stations for electric vehicles. They received a grant from Xcel Energy. So we don't, let's not look just within our 4 borders here. Let's look, how can we grow this and develop partnerships there? Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Esslinger. We're going to move on now. Supervisors, please take your hands down if you've forgotten. Thank you. The next item is a written report, the contingency fund report from the Finance Department. You have that in your packet. Next item on our agenda is first reading of ordinances by committees. The Committee on Parks and Forests, File 91.
To amend Section 16.30.010 D26 of the Code, designation of park, special use area, and wayside boundaries, and land subject to this chapter. To create Section 16.30.010 D27 of the Code, designation of park, special use area, and wayside boundaries, and lands subject to this chapter.
Thank you. This is an ordinance change. This is first reading, so will be referred on to our next county board meeting. Next item on our agenda, under item 10, reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards under 2.04.160, and second reading of ordinances from the Committee on Administration, File 92.
Creating a select committee to serve as the building committee for the Highway Department building project authorized by the county boards.
We'll take motions by voice. Moved. Motion.
Judy Gatlin, move.
Moved by Gatlin.
Second, Hamburg Boyle.
Second by Hamburg Boyle. Thank you. From the Committee Administration, Supervisor Bates with explanation.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. As you are aware, the county board approved borrowing funds not to exceed $44 million earlier. And those funds were to be used for a major building project, which consisted of the new Highway Department facility. This resolution creates a 7-person highway building committee. It'll oversee the project, and basically it would be terminated in June 30th of 2023. There would be a per diem for members of this committee, $30 per meeting. And also the committee consists of the 3 elected officers of the board, a member of the Highway Committee, a member of Finance and Budget, plus 2 additional supervisors. This resolution passed the administrative committee unanimously.
Thank you. Is there any question or is there any discussion? I'm looking for hands raised. I see none. We will do this by voice vote. All those in favor of file 92, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. The decision is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 96.
Commending and recognizing County Clerk Janet J. Loomis for her dedication and years of service to Eau Claire County.
Motion by Larry,
Motion by Supervisor Wilkie.
second by
I think I
Larry.
heard Supervisor Leary moving first, and I will take Supervisor Wilkie as the second. Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is truly a pleasure. Janet Loomis has indeed been a part of our organization for 27 years. She began as the first deputy clerk in 1993. Following that, she was elected 7 years later as county clerk in fall of 2000. Her first day of work as the county clerk was in January of 2001. I think that obviously her record and her ability and her dedication speaks for herself. She has served 7 consecutive terms and has overseen all of the elections during that period of time with actually an amazing 100% error-free election process. I don't know that we can say enough about the person that all of us have contacted at one point or another. But obviously her dedication or an exemplary public service needs to be applauded. This came through the administration committee and was passed unanimously.
Thank you. I will claim my privilege as chair to reinforce what Supervisor Bates has just said. Clerk Loomis has been a tremendous help to me and has helped me through many lapses in my functioning and has been my true right-hand helper during these meetings. So I wonder if we don't vote this and we prohibit her from retiring, maybe keep her on.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Wilkie.
Well, Supervisor Wilkie, I was just going to say that I don't expect controversy here, and if you would make your comment relatively brief, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make it brief. Janet, I offer your congratulations on all the great work you've done, and thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilkie. Supervisors, I'm going to call for a voice vote on this, followed by affirmation of applause. Please unmute all those in favor of file 96, commending Clerk Loomis. Please indicate by saying a loud aye.
Yay, Janet.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed. We have to all vote first. Sorry. And all those opposed, and I can't imagine there are any, please indicate by saying nay or boo. Supervisors, now is our moment to congratulate Clerk Loomis.
Janet.
Congratulations.
This is Clerk Loomis, and I know I'm not supposed to speak without being asked to, but thank you very much. That was very kind of all of you.
Comments are always welcome. Administrator Chop, did you Did you have something to present?
Could you, the county has so appreciated the integrity with which Clerk Loomis performs her duties and has overseen elections and done her work. And as a recognition of her work, we actually have, I don't know if you can see this, we created a plaque for Clerk Loomis commending her for her service to Eau Claire County.
And now we will put Clerk Loomis back to work.
Okay.
File 97.
That the state of Wisconsin provide increased funding for the county child support program.
Motion.
Schneider.
Moved by Supervisor Schneider, second.
Neiman.
Second by Neiman. Thank you. Background, Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Chair. This resolution is one that should be familiar to us because we've gone through the process at another time. But we're looking for increased funding from the state of Wisconsin for our child support program. In Wisconsin, we've always been extremely supportive of child support. And obviously, because it's administered on a local level, our county child support agencies do receive funding from both the federal government and indirectly, because it comes through the state, and from the state of Wisconsin. The child support program in Wisconsin has typically been one of the top performing programs in the country. It ranked number 2. It has fallen to number 5. And part of the reason for that is that really the funding has shrunk, and that does create an issue. Funding in the state level has failed to keep pace with our increased costs, and due to increased caseload, inflation, and federal regulations. We realize that if we don't maintain this funding, the likely result will be less services performed by the county. And there were some changes in the interpretation of the federal regulation regarding reimbursement for federal birth cost recovery matching funds, resulting in a loss of $4.2 million to the state child support program. And obviously that impacts us as well. The resolution is requesting that the state increase its funding by approximately $4 million each fiscal year for 2021 through and 2023 in their state budget. This also means that we'll be matching funds from the federal government of approximately $7.7 million per year. So for each dollar that we collect, we get $6.20 in child support for every dollar we invest. I urge your support.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Is there any discussion? By raised hand, please, or voice.
Schneider has a question.
I was just going to say from the phone. Go ahead, Supervisor Schneider.
Is this something that we could take to the counties association and get 71 other counties to support as well?
Chair Schmeier, this is Tim Sullivan. Maybe I can answer that question.
Go ahead, Tim.
This resolution is actually coming from the Wisconsin Child Support Enforcement Association. So it's coming from essentially the 72 different child support agencies. The Child Support Enforcement Association is the association of the county child support agencies at the state level. And that association works with the State Bureau of Child Support on funding issues and basically is requested that this resolution go through so that we inform legislators that we need to have more funding come to the child support programs, not only at the state, but also the county levels.
Supervisor Snyder, did that respond to your question?
So other counties are seeing similar resolutions?
Yes.
Thanks.
Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering how this translates into a dollar amount for our county. The loss of funding.
That's not a real easy question to answer because funding at the local level is determined by a number of different items. It's determined by caseload, but it's also determined by performance. And there are 5 different performance areas where funding is determined for the local child support agency. And so depending on the performance of the county, if it's a good performing county, it's going to increase the amount of dollars that are going to being brought into the county. But if it's a county that's not performing as well, there's going to be less money that's going to come to that county. So, to say that it's going to be divided equally among the 72 counties is difficult to do because there are different caseloads or different performance levels, those sorts of things. I can tell you that Eau Claire County has been increasing its performance over the last couple of years. There were a couple of areas that we were just right at the line about, and we are now reaching and going above that line. And so hopefully we'll benefit our county, having this additional funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I see no other hands raised or voices from the telephone. So we'll proceed to a voice vote. All those in favor of file 97, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 98.
Supporting the creation of the Chippewa St. Croix Rail Commission with counties and municipalities.
Motion.
Ray Henning will move.
I'll second Nancy Coffee.
Second by Coffee. Thank you for providing name. That helps. Background, Supervisor Bates. With backup, I think, from Supervisor Dunning. Supervisor Bates, are you there?
Oh, I am. Thank you. The board has received just a very comprehensive report on this particular issue this evening. And obviously there are many, many reasons why we should consider support of this particular resolution. And would like to invite Supervisor Dunning, should he have anything further he would like to share.
Thank you, Supervisor Bates. But I think that with the slideshow that we had earlier and the discussion that we've had, and we've pretty much covered the issues. This is very important that we get this organization so that we can provide this leadership, not just Eau Claire County, but the Dunn counties and the Chippewa counties and St. Croix counties, that we get their help and get their impetus behind this. And by us leading the way, it certainly will be helpful to get this moving. So we're looking forward to leading the way.
Thank you. Questions or discussion by raised hand or voice from the phone? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices from the phone. Was that someone who wanted to speak?
No.
Okay. We'll now proceed to a vote on file 98. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 99.
Authorizing county to proceed with a project to provide broadband services to a rural area near the city of Augusta and to apply for a grant from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation to help pay for that project.
Motion.
From Bates.
Supervisor Bates moves.
I'll second it.
Is that Supervisor Roberts?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Supervisor Roberts seconds. Explanation, Supervisor Bates, backed up by Supervisor Maury.
Thank you. And really, this indicates that the broadband committee that was created by this board has certainly been busy and obviously making progress in regard to providing services in our county. And I would invite Supervisor Maury, who has been a very active part of this committee, to explain further.
Supervisor Maury.
Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Bates and Chair Smeyer. You have a very detailed fact sheet on this project. I can add a few more details as well. Basically, it's a collaboration between SpaceX, or Starlink is the satellite wing, and the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation and the county for a pilot broadband program that will serve 50 households in an unserved or underserved area of the county. And it's an area of the county that's very difficult to justify other means of providing high-speed broadband because of the cost of stringing fiber, for example, or the population density is such that even wireless would not work out. We're hoping for an expedited program that would start in mid-January to sometime in February and go for 12 months as a pilot. The WEDC would offer the county an opportunity to apply for a grant of $25,000, which would pay for the installation costs, which are approximately $500 per household of the satellite and associated electronics. The resolution also says that Eau Claire County would not be liable for more than 50% of the remaining $60,000. However, Dave Hayden, our IT department director, has already discussed this with the county administrator, Catherine Schaaf, and the finance director, Norb Kirk. Dave has about $30,000 in unspent funds in the IT department because of COVID savings and from 2020, so that amount could be applied to meet that 50%. The partners also really want us to get community buy-in through contributions from individuals, businesses, nonprofit organizations, or even businesses outside of the area that have employees that live in the area to make up the remaining $30,000 in individual monthly fees. We've already received, and we've just started the fundraising process, but Lynn Thompson, who is the CEO of Eau Claire Energy Development Cooperative, has already convinced his board to contribute $5,000. So I think that is indication of the interest that exists for this service. So the committee is also approaching businesses, school districts, Chippewa Valley Technical College, even the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, and others, Chamber of Commerce, CSA District, and this includes individual households. As the resolution states in the last paragraph, we haven't yet decided yet who would be eligible to apply for this or what would the criteria for selection be, but we are proceeding with that. In fact, it's on our agenda for this week's meeting, and we'll be working with the Corporation Council to develop an agreement with those entities and individuals that choose to contribute to the project and to develop criteria for selecting individuals or entities that will be chosen. I just want to remind the board that this expanding broadband to unserved and underserved areas of the county is in our long-range plan as an emphasis. And because of the realities of population density, geography, installation costs, we can't use one particular technology to serve the whole county. We're going to have to use a mix of technologies, including fiber to the household, satellite, and wireless are the three that are currently being pursued. And the other, I would also remind the board that COVID-19 has really exposed the inequities of broadband access across the county, and it's made it difficult for children who cannot attend school in person to attend school virtually if they don't have access to high-speed broadband. It would also contribute to carbon net neutrality goals because it would help to allow people to get education at home if there's a reason they can't attend in person, telehealth, agricultural applications, and so on, less commuting, all that would make a contribution. The Broadband Committee has also worked with other entities, and there are currently grants have been submitted to the state as of December 1st that will bring, if funded, would bring broadband to the whole town of Drammen and 30 households in Brunswick, including the town hall and the fire station, and even a district around Lake Eau Claire. So there's at least 3 other projects that, if funded and go ahead, will be expanding broadband in the county. So I'm very excited about this project. It is a pilot, and if it's successful, it would really help to serve those areas that are very difficult to serve otherwise because of the cost of laying fiber or the distances between people and things like a wireless tower. So I would urge you to support this resolution. The administration committee, the broadband committee voted unanimously to support it, and the administration committee also voted unanimously to support it.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? Looking for hands or voices from the phone.
Schneider with a comment.
Supervisor Schneider.
I hope when you figure out the criteria for who gets one of those 50 slots that you consider that it shouldn't just be who can pay for it, because I think some of the people who need it the most may not be able to pay for it. So I hope there's a provision for equitable distribution of the slots.
That is a consideration. And also we hope to publicize the programs that might help people be able to afford it. There is a Lifeline program that if they qualify for things like supplemental nutrition assistance program or are receiving other benefits, they can receive a monthly payment of, it's only about $10, but at least it might help someone be able to afford broadband. So we hope to work with all sectors of the community.
Supervisor Gatlin, followed by Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supervisor Maury, if you recall, you and I both were at a presentation a while back. I think you were early on in the board, and there were several people at the table, including people from the medical facilities.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, how do we get the foundations and the rich foundations of Marshfield Clinic, Mayo Clinic involved financially?
Yeah. Those are,
I mean, I know that's, but tell me why they're not at the table now.
They are at the table. They're on the broadband committee, and we will be approaching them to help us generate the sponsorship we need to be able to make the fees lower or pay for the fees. And they have either through their employees that live in these areas or through the push to expand things like telehealth services. They definitely have a foot in the door, so to speak. They have an investment in supporting this kinds of expansion.
Well, you didn't mention them when you mentioned the list. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, how are you going, let's say an individual person wanted to donate funds, how do they go about that? And have you thought about reaching out to people who would like to sponsor the cost of the people that you choose? Maybe they can't afford it. Would there be a way of people sponsoring them?
Yeah. Again, we haven't worked out the details. That's a good question. And but we have thought that for example, a business might sponsor and pay or contribute to an employee that lives in the area and doesn't have access to high-speed internet, for example. The contributions do not have to be made totally upfront. They might stretch out over the 12-month period, so that might make it easier for people as well to be able to provide a donation for the service, if that's a criteria that we decide on.
Thank you. I see no other hands raised.
I have my hand raised.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Christopherson. I have to keep scrolling this thing up and down.
I know it's got to be tough. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
I really very much support broadband initiatives, and I just have a few questions. Supervisor Mowry helped me with one of the questions that I had concerned about, and that was the $60,000 that's remaining. I guess if 30,000 can come from county COVID money and 5,000, we still have $25,000 that is not yet, as we make this resolution, been supported. And one of my questions would be where those dollars would come from in our county budget because we are responsible for that money, if I'm understanding that correctly. My other concern is that once our 50 people are chosen, the following year, they will be responsible, if the program is successful, to pay for this on their own, which would be about $100 a month. If it's successful, I know even in the city, we are paying about $75 a month personally in our household just for internet access, and the houses are much closer together. So do we have any assurance from SpaceX that these rates will be reasonable for families once they've had that broadband? And what is the precedence that is set by providing this to individuals, and in this case $1,200 for a year, to other constituents, and where's the equity so that we are fair with all of our residents?
I'm going to turn that question over, if possible, to Dave Hayden. Are you still on the line, Dave?
Yes, I'm still here.
Because Dave has been our primary contact with SpaceX, and he may be able to speak to that question about what happens after the year pilot.
Yeah, at the end of the pilot year, we have the opportunity to extend the pilot for another year, or SpaceX will transition the people to a subscription service. So they won't cut people off from the service at the end of the pilot period. They will have the opportunity to continue the service.
So after that second year, then, if they couldn't afford it, could that equipment be taken to another household, or is that even a possibility, that $500 worth of equipment at that household?
Yeah, the equipment is reusable. So yeah, it could be, if it can't be used where it was originally deployed, I believe it could be used in other locations.
Okay. And what if we can't afford, or we don't get people to support that last $25,000? Where would that come from in our county budget?
Yeah, depending on where we are with that, I may be able to find some additional funds, but I fully expect that the community will step up and hopefully contribute the balance of that. It is a very beneficial project, and to prove the technology in these rural areas would be a real good thing to do, because that then would make that technology potentially available all across the county.
Supervisor Christopherson, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair Smyer. I just have a very brief comment. I just want to echo Supervisor Schneider's concern about equity in choosing those 50 candidates for this pilot program. Hoping that a consideration will be to reach out to the local school districts to find out if there are students that are not able to complete their work and get the education that they deserve because they don't have access to internet.
Thank you. Supervisor Russell, your hand is still raised. Did you wish to speak or did you forget?
No, I took it down before. I raised it again.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. One is this the only pilot using SpaceX in Wisconsin? Will there be other areas where they're having other pilot programs? And secondly, are we thinking just of private households and families? Is this not being looked at as economic development, possibly for small businesses?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to again turn to Dave to respond to that question.
Sure. Yeah, both businesses and households will be considered for this. I think it's a very valuable tool potentially for small businesses and farms. I think there's an opportunity there for internet access to benefit them as well. I apologize. What was the other question?
Well, I was just wondering if this is the only pilot project like this in the state.
Although it hasn't been confirmed, the map that we got from the Public Service Commission indicating the target area for Eau Claire County had a number 2 by it. So I suspect somewhere else, probably on the eastern side of the state, there's a number 1. And I'm also aware of another pilot program that's started just recently in the state of Washington. So this is going on in other areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Anton with a question.
Go ahead.
Has the township and the city of Augusta and perhaps other government entities been contacted as a source of support for this program?
We have not, I'm not sure that we have or have not. We started dividing up responsibility as a committee at our last meeting. We are meeting again this week, and that's a great suggestion. I'll make sure that that we address the possibility of asking for support from Augusta and what was the other town of?
The township around the city is involved in this project. As a representative for this area, I am hearing from the folks that they think it's a good idea. They're not that familiar with it. They just recognize that it ought to happen if it can be arranged.
Yeah.
I did make a brief presentation, if I may. I did make a brief presentation at the Towns Association meeting, and then reached out directly to the townships in that area via email with some additional information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other than Supervisor Christopherson's hand, which I still see raised, I see no other hands raised. And I hear no voices from the phone. Supervisors, we will now proceed to vote on file 99. All those in favor of file 99, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It's unanimous. Thank you. The next item is the Committee on Judiciary Law, file 89.
Support pending legislation to amend hearing time frames for juveniles taken into custody under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 938, to coincide with hearing timelines for children taken into custody under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 48.
Motion.
Russell, motion.
Say again.
Russell, motion.
Russell moves. Second.
Gatlin.
Second by Gatlin. Explanation, Supervisor Wilkie.
Yes, this is brought to you by Judiciary and Law. We're offering this resolution to encourage the state to change the hearing timelines for juveniles in need of protective services to coincide with the hearing timelines for children in need of protective services. The one requires 24 hours have to have a hearing. The other one requires 48 hours. Under Chapter 38, staff are required to have to come in to hold detention hearing when they fall under the 24-hour timeline. Other counties are submitting a similar resolution. What we're doing is we're requesting the legislators to change the timelines to be consistent with Chapter 48 so that you'd hold a hearing at 48 hours. The research that we had by Corp Counsel, likely this was an oversight. The reason for doing this, it would save on limited resources we have. The committee voted 5-0 in favor of introducing this resolution, and like many other counties that are doing this resolution would also go to the Wisconsin Counties Association, and I would think that they would take it up and for consideration in their platform. Ask for your support.
Is there any question? Is there any discussion? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices from the telephone. Supervisors will now proceed to a vote on file 89, excuse me. All those in favor of file 89, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. The next is from the Committee on Parks and Forests, file 93.
Adopting the 2021 annual work plan for the Parks and Forest Department to comply with the County Forest Administration Grant Program.
Motion.
Schaffnagel.
Schaffner moves.
Yep.
Knight second.
Knight second. Thank you. Explanation, Supervisor Stelzis.
Yes, thank you, Chair Schumacher. First of all, this resolution did pass last night at the committee level, 5-0. We do this annually, and as most of you probably are aware, all of our forest lands that are owned by the county within the county are enrolled in the state county forest program. They don't have to be, but they are, and that brings a number of benefits. One of which is that we are able to apply for a grant every year that reimburses the county for up to 50% of our director's salary and benefits. So one of the requirements to apply for that grant is to submit an annual work plan. We do that every year. As you may recall, last year we just tried to highlight a few things. Probably the feature item last year was the development of the ski skills park at Tower Ridge in conjunction with the ski striders. That project got mostly completed, although it hasn't been completely revegetated. But for those of you who get out to Tower Ridge from time to time, you can see that. Ongoing interesting things in the work plan this coming year probably involve trying to improve the canoe landings at both the Highway D Bridge and at Harstead Park. And the primary focus of this grant is really the forestry practices, which are enumerated at the end of the work plan. I just wanted to mention one thing, that periodically the state does audit the Parks and Forest Department for compliance with the state county forest program. They completed that audit early in 2020 and submitted an extensive report on how they viewed Eau Claire County's program, and it was generally very, very high remarks as far as managing our forest, record keeping, compliance with the various environmental facets that they require of us. So I think that this plan again sets us up to comply with those, and I would ask that you grant your approval on this resolution so we can apply for the grant.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices from the phone other than a cough or two. All those in favor of file 93, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. The last item on our agenda is appointments. The chair is breaking these into two sections. First, the chair looks for a motion to confirm appointment to the Local Emergency Planning Committee of Diane Hunter, to the Land Information Council, Bruce King, to the City County Board of Health, Mary Price. Looking for a motion to confirm.
This is Dunning, I'll confirm.
DeLuca seconds.
Moved by Dunning, second by DeLuca. Any discussion? All those in favor of these of confirming these appointments, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. The final section is the appointment to the Communicable Disease Ordinance Task Force, and I want to preface this with a couple of comments. This is a city-county collaborative task force. The collaborating entities are the county, the city, and the City County Board of Health. And that has been Terry Weld and Mary Price and I have worked on this for about 2 months, trying to get as complete and thorough a representation as possible. The other comment I have is that there are those who probably will be disappointed that they were not appointed, even if they volunteered. However, the plan is to have listening sessions to involve the community in the process of the discussion. So having said that, the chair looks for confirmation to the Communicable Disease Ordinance Task Force of Lisa Vladilek, Anna Ziebel, Brandon Riekers, Bruce Barker, a city council member to be determined by Terry Weld, Kristen Pierce, Don Bedell, Emily Smith Nguyen, Grace Cricket, Jeff Hollowan, Joe Sanfilippo, Ken Johnson, Kimberly Kronk, Lori Wittes, Mai Zhang, Marisa Stanley, Michael Johnson, Miriam Gaylor, and Scott Rogers. For a motion to confirm.
By Leary.
Second by Anderson. Bates.
Moved by Leary, second by
Bates.
Anderson.
Yeah, I'll take Anderson second. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of these appointments, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. We have reached the end of our agenda. Supervisors, thank you for your patience tonight. And I want to point out to you that we have made some really significant steps this evening in many ways. So thank you for your work. And a final congratulations to Clerk Loomis on her retirement.
Amen.
She's waving at us, so we'll all wave.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County.